On this short video, I'm going to discuss some of the basic ideas of the Mikvah. First of all, where the Talmud learns the idea of immersing in the Mikvah and what the Mikvah actually means and how it's constructed. This is going to be very basic, and it's based on our weekly reading. In the end of our Parsha, Parshat Metzorah, the Torah discusses various types of uncleanliness, ritual uncleanliness, both for men and for women. But the majority of those laws do not really apply to us in practical ways today. And the reason is that since we're unclean anyway, almost every person today is considered ritually unclean, because anytime you're in the same building with a dead body or parts of dead body, you become unclean, and the only way to purify yourself is through the ashes of the red cow, which we don't have today. So at the very least, we're all unclean on that level from the impurity of dead, of the corpses. There are other types of uncleanliness, but this is the one that we absolutely cannot do anything about. And therefore, we just don't do things that the Torah prescribes, that the Torah forbids an unclean person to do. Mainly, it means we don't go to the place where the temple stood, and we don't eat those types of foods that can be eaten only in ritual purity. For example, the Kohanim, the descendants of Aaron, today don't eat Truma and Challah. So that's the main consequence of us being unclean. And therefore, most of the laws of ritual purity do not apply to us today, and there is not even the Talmud to the Mishnayot. There is Mishnah on all these laws. A lot of the tractates of the Mishnah deal with various types of ritual impurity. But there is only one tractate that has the Babylonian and the Jerusalem Talmud, and that is tractate Nida, because these are the only laws of impurity that still applies to us today. And that is that a woman after her period needs to go to the Mikvah. And that's what I'm going to discuss in just a few short words based on what the Torah says and what the Chazal say. So in this week's Parsha, as I said, there are both men and women, various types of things that can make a man or a woman unclean. In the case of a man, the word is Zav or Balkeri, a person who either had relations with his wife, for instance, or maybe at night he had his semen came out, he becomes unclean ritually. Or something called Ziva. Ziva is something else. It's a kind of sickness which also has to do with some kind of physical liquids that come out. Maybe it's gonorrhea, or maybe it includes all kinds of other diseases. It's not exactly clear, and the Talmud discusses the differences between the regular sperm and what's called Ziva. As I said, today none of this applies to us because we're unclean anyway. With women, the main source of impurity is when a woman has blood, that is during her period, but it doesn't have to be during her period. At any time when the blood comes out, she has menstruation, that's what makes a woman unclean. But the Torah discusses three types of women: regular period, the regular Nida, the unusual time for the blood to come out, and that's called Zava, just like men. For a man who has some kind of liquids that come out that make him unclean, he's called Zav. So the female, right, the feminine of the same word is Zava. And that's not a regular Nida, that's not a regular period. It's rather a time when the blood comes out in unusual times. And the Talmud defines exactly what those times are. There's a dispute between Rambam and most other Rishonim how exactly to calculate that. But as I'll explain in a moment, none of this practically applies to us. And then there's something called Zava Gdola. The difference, as the Torah clearly states in the end of this week's Parsha, is a woman who sees blood many days versus not many days. So what's considered many? The Talmud tells us it's 3 days. So there are three situations: regular period, that's called Nida; a Zava who sees her blood in unusual times, and it's only for 1 or 2 days; and at last a Zava that saw any amount of blood, that had menstruation at an unusual time, and it lasted for 3 days. So that last case is the worst in terms of how many days she has to wait. In the case of Nida, the Torah clearly defines that she is only unclean for 7 days altogether. Even if all 7 days she has her period, it doesn't matter. At the end of 7 days, she would go to the mikvah and that's it. If she is a Zava, she would have to wait 1 day. But if she is Zava Gdola, meaning she has her menstruation for 3 days in a row in unusual time, then she has to wait 7 clean days. Not just 7 days, but 7 clean days. That means that for 7 days, when she does not have her period, when she does not have any blood, and only then she goes to the mikvah. So the Talmud tells us in the Masechet Nida that the Jewish women, the daughters of Israel as it calls them, accepted upon themselves that they will always consider themselves the worst of the 3 scenarios, the Zava Gdola case, meaning even regular Nida, even any kind of Zava. Anytime a woman has menstruation, she will wait 7 clean days. So that's not the letter of the law, right? As I said, the letter of the law is that if she's Nida, not Zava, if her period is in normal times, then she would only have to wait 7 days total, not 7 clean days. 7 days including the days of her menstruation. But because it's very hard to calculate all these things, and as I mentioned, there are actually disputes exactly what is considered the time of Zava and what is considered the times of Nida. So therefore, our women all wait 7 clean days. No matter how long was their menstruation, always wait 7 clean days. So for Ashkenazic women, the typical custom is that she waits at least 5 days during her menstruation. Even if the menstruation finishes faster than that, she still waits 5 full days. If, of course, it lasts longer, then it lasts longer. But as soon as the menstruation is over, if after 6 or 7 or 8 days, whatever the time it lasts, she waits another 7 full days that no blood is coming. And only then she goes to the mikvah. Now at last, the going to the mikvah itself. How is mikvah made? What is the word mikvah? How do we know that it has to be a specific size? And where is it even written that a Nida has to immerse in the mikvah? All of these questions are actually much more complex than I'm going to tell you. I'm just going to try to summarize and simplify things, but what I will say is correct. It's just somewhat simplifying things. So first of all, the Torah in this week's Parsha does not say that the Nida at the end has to go to the mikvah. But it does mention that even somebody who touches a bed on which the Nida lie down would have to immerse himself or herself. Now, that would be for the laws of ritual purity. As I said, those laws don't apply to them. We're all unclean anyway. But at least theoretically, a person who even touches a bed of Nida would have to go to the mikvah. So some sages learn from here that certainly Nida herself has to go to the mikvah. There are other ways to learn it too. There is a place in the Torah, in the book of Bamidbar, and closer to the end, where the water of Mikvah is called Nida. So by default, the Mikvah water is called water of Nida, which is the water where the Nida immerses herself. So whatever the case may be, there are various hints to the fact that the Nida, in order to purify herself, has to go to the Mikvah. But what's a Mikvah? Now, the word itself, the root of that word is, of course, biblical. We actually find in the very beginning of the Torah that the Torah tells us that Lemikveh hamayim karayamim, that Hashem called the gatherings of water the seas are gatherings of water. So a sea, for instance, is a kosher mikvah. Mikvah comes, the root itself, the etymology of it has to do with some kind of gathering together, meaning it's a kind of puddle. It has to be together as opposed to running water. Now it turns out that running water sometimes is good too, but it has to be from the earth. It has to come from natural, what's called Mayim Chaim, the life water. By the way, this concept is mentioned a number of times, even in this week's Parsha, Mayim Chaim, the life water. What is that life water? That's the kind of springs that come from the earth, as opposed to rainwater or the snow that melts. So the water that comes from the earth, even if it's not mikveh, even if it's not gathered together in a kind of puddle, it would be good to immerse. In terms of rivers, there was a dispute if one is allowed to immerse in the rivers. And today's rivers, they have an additional problem because a lot of them have these electric stations that use the current to produce electricity, and then the water goes through various vessels and may become not good for the mikvah. So I'm not going to discuss that today. Vast majority of the women would not go to immerse themselves in the river anyway. It's too uncomfortable. So how is the mikvah actually built in practice? So as I said, the mikvah itself is a gathering of water. It could be rainwater. It has to be natural water. It could be rainwater. It could be snow that melted. But the actual place where the people tovel, where the people immerse themselves, it does not have to be in the rainwater. In fact, for various reasons, not the least of which is the cleanliness, the way the mikvahs are built is that the place where people actually immerse is regular water from the tap. But it's connected to the water that's natural. There has to be rain or snow water, that the snow that melted, or rainwater that came to a certain bore, what's called, a certain pit in which the water gathered naturally. So that water has a minimal size, and it's learned from this week's Parsha. It says that kol bisaro. It talks about actually a man after his sperm came out. It says that he has to wash all of his flesh. And the Talmud tells us what's the amount of water that's needed to immerse the entire flesh, the entire body. So they estimated this to be 3 amot by 1 amma by 1 amma, which is also equal to 40 seah. Now, seah is a biblical term, by the way. In this week's Haftorah, the word seah is mentioned. It's a volume that was used in the times of the Bible, but the exact amount the Talmud tells us is 1/3 of ephah, and ephah is 10 times omer. Remember, omer and ephah mentioned in the end of Parshat Bishalach, the omer of man that they used to gather. So this omer is, by the way, the minimal amount of flour or dough from which challah is taken, and that's 43 1/5 of an egg. So 10 times as much, which is 432 eggs, would be 1 ephah, and 1/3 of that ephah is seah. And multiply that by 40, you'll get 40 seah. That's the amount of water that's needed in order for it to be a kosher mikvah. So 40 seah is usually estimated to be about 500 liters or less. So that's the amount of rainwater in the bore. And as I said, the mikvah itself today is built separately, and it's with regular water, with water from the sink, basically, the regular water that gets switched every day so that it's clean. And it's connected through a hashaka, what's called, through a certain hole. It's connected to the source of natural water, the bore. That's how mikvah is built. And there are other ways to build a mikvah, but this is the simplest way. And it's really a little bit more complex because a lot of mikvahs have more than one bore. Again, I'm not going to go into all the details. I want to just discuss how practically all of this works. So our women, after their period is over, and for Ashkenazic women, it has to be no less than 5 days after the beginning of the period. Even if the period is over earlier, they still wait 5 full days. And then 7 clean days, and then they wash, they bath themselves, they make sure that there is no chatzitza, there's nothing in their hair or on the body that prevents the water from touching it. And then they go to the mikvah and immerse themselves. And that's the ritual purity laws that we still observe today. Practically the only ritual purity laws that we still observe, as opposed to, as I said, all these other laws of purity, the immersions that our ancestors used to do, all kinds of immersions for all kinds of reasons, that we don't do. But I should mention here that there is something in the Talmud called Tvilat Ezra that still many men observe today, even though the Talmud concludes it's not really obligatory nowadays, but a lot of men observe that, and that is if a man was with his wife, or if he had maybe at night sperm came out, then he goes to the mikvah in the morning. And this, as I said, is not really because of the laws of ritual purity, which don't apply today, but rather because of the special Tvilat Ezra, which was instituted, and later it was revoked, kind of, but a lot of people still observe it. So therefore there are men's mikvahs today, but this is not really obligatory. A lot of Hasidic synagogues have a mikvah under the synagogue, and many men, before they pray in the morning, they go to they take a shower, and then they go to and immerse themselves in the mikvah. Some people immerse in the mikvah every day, whether they were with their wives or not. I guess this is a kind of extra purity, but this is definitely not obligatory in any sense. It's just a Hasidic minhag, a custom by some Hasidim. But only the immersion that's really according to the letter of the law that still exists today, and that's the immersion of married women who go to the mikvah approximately once a month after they waited 7 clean days. And then I just want to mention one thing about the keeping of family purity, that of course all Orthodox Jews keep family purity. There are some people who don't really consider themselves Orthodox and they still keep these laws for various reasons. There are quite a number of women who accepted on themselves to keep these laws. And one great benefit of these laws, a kind of positive side effect, if we could call it that way, and that is that for women who just had their menstruation, to have relations with a man is not a good idea. It's not healthy at all. So when they wait 7 full days after the period, it's actually considered very healthy. And the gynecologists also talk about it, that it's a great thing in terms of avoiding certain diseases, that for women who keep family purity, they're very much protected in terms of certain diseases that are more common among the general populace. Another interesting positive side effect of keeping the family purity is on psychological level. There is actually a hint to this in the Talmud, and that is that once the couple has a period of break, kind of, when they're not permitted to be intimately together for a whole 12 or so days, and sometimes longer, if the period lasts longer, that improves their family life, kind of, because every month or so they have almost a new wedding, a new what they call honeymoon, because once if the people are always permitted to each other and they can have relations all the time, then this kind of causes a oversaturation, or the kind of psychological feeling that whatever is too available, people don't appreciate it much. It's really true about everything, about food, for instance, also. The only foods that we appreciate are foods that we rarely eat. If we eat every day the most expensive and delicacies, then we're not going to enjoy it that much. So in particular, the greatest human temptation probably is various forbidden relations. And if a man is always permitted to be with his wife, then oftentimes he may start looking for things on the side, kind of. And if his own wife is only permitted at certain times, then they experience a kind of renewal of intimate relations every month, and that works really well. There is a controversial rabbi, Rabbi Shmuel Bateach, who wrote a number of things on this topic, and he suggests even for non-Jews, just as a practical thing, to make a break during relations once so often, to have each time a kind of renewal that will bring new enjoyment to it. And on this I'm going to end for today, and if you like this video, please press like, and if you have questions, please write. I try to answer b'li neder whenever I have a possibility.